from a scientific or from a scientist's point of view, this sounds like religion. It sounds like more belief, that we have to believe in God. But no, because the Vedic tradition shows us how things work, it helps us to analyze the nature of conscious experience. So consequently, all of this can be established from the point of view of belief, and, not from belief, but of logic, not just of belief. So, therefore, the scientific point of view, or the material scientist's point of view, that we can't accept this because it's just religion, this is invalid. Science was started, material science began in the Renaissance, and the idea was to get certain knowledge. Prior to that, knowledge was mixed up, there was some observation, a lot of rumour, a lot of belief, a lot of irrationality. So the founders of modern science, Descartes, for example, Bacon, and then later Newton, so they established the process of observing phenomena from an objective point of view. And gradually they developed this so that they became very, very expert and very effective in deducing universal principles that governed the behavior of matter. So from that came, they had great confidence that, this objective knowledge is very, very powerful. Gradually they came to the point of view thinking that objective knowledge is the most important kind of knowledge. From that, they came to think that objective knowledge is the only kind of knowledge. And anything that's not covered by objective knowledge doesn't exist. It's unreal, it's imaginary. Unfortunately, that includes the person, the conscious scientist who's doing science. That, unfortunately, they didn't recognize. But in general, material scientists refuse to accept anything which can't be covered by material science. They say that everything is just, in principle, everything is simply the activity of physical laws, like gravitation, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak interactions within the atom. Everything in principle is covered by that. There is nothing in the universe which can't in principle be described and explained, can't be in terms of those interactions, those physical interactions. For example, John Maynard Smith, he's observing that the physical constants in the universe are very, very inconceivably finely tuned. So he says, the simplest interpretation is that the universe was designed by a creator who intended that intelligent life should evolve. And then he says, this interpretation lies outside science. There's another professor of astronomy, George Greenstein in USA. He says, as we survey all the evidence, the thought insistently arises that some supernatural agency must be involved. Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being? So he admits that this is what it points at, and this is not. God is not an explanation. So this attitude actually has been taken to the extreme. There's one famous evolutionary biologist, Richard Lewontin. He's a geneticist at Harvard. So he said, he's explaining why material scientists won't accept the supernatural. So he says, our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to the understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of its constructs, of some of its constructs. And he says that their whole policy is, then he continues, he says, it's not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world. It's not that science kind of inexorably points at a material explanation. No. He says, rather we're forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive they are. That materialism, he says, is absolute. for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So this, we've got two opposing schools of thought. And it's clear from here, if you follow it through, it's clear that the materialists are covering up a very, very serious strain or a gigantic... there's a tremendous amount of irrationality in their outlook. That we're actually dealing with belief. Not a belief in the natural, rather than belief in the supernatural. The religion, faithful adherence to religion, they have belief in the supernatural, but it's rational. It's reasonable to think that a supreme intelligence created the universe. That's reasonable. The material scientists, on the other hand, they have a complete belief in the natural, and that's irrational, because science itself can't have come just by physical causes. It doesn't. We see clearly that it didn't happen that way. So there's a big difference, a radical difference between, on the one hand, science, on the other hand, scientism. Scientism is a blind and irrational faith in the power, the universal power of material science, whereas science is simply the study of knowledge, all knowledge. Knowledge of matter, knowledge of consciousness. Actually, the material scientists have kidnapped or hijacked the word science. Originally, science meant systematic knowledge. And before that, if you look back 12 or 1300 AD, it meant the knowledge that God has of the world as a whole. God's knowledge. And now it's been taken to mean that which is found through the investigation of matter. So there's been like newspeak. The word has been changed. And it's very, very difficult to escape from that framework. And that is what that's what the Vedic wisdom tradition does. Just like here we see there's flies trapped inside the windows. They got in somehow or other. They can't remember how they got in. And they're buzzing on the window, looking through the window at the meadows outside. And they can't get through. And the only way they're going to get out is if somebody kindly opens the window and throws them out. And the Vedic wisdom tradition gives us an open door which allows us to completely revise a whole way of thinking, a whole way of looking at the world, and see that actually the way that we're looking is completely the wrong way. And the door lies in a different direction. And that's the purpose of this module.